The hearing will come to order. This is a joint hearing of the House and Senate Western Caucuses to discuss some of the critical issues that we are facing in the West, dealing with regulatory overburden and the difficulty that we have with federal agencies overreaching and frankly failing to understand the roles that they need to be performing as they deal with us and help and work with us to administer our federal law. Senator Barrasso, the co-chairman on the Senate side, and Representative Steve Pierce, the chairman on the House side. I guess you have a co-chairmanship there. Is that correct? Are here to help preside. I will be presiding over the actual operations of the hearing. And we have with us Representative Rob Bishop as well at this point. We expect to have other senators coming through and members of the House coming through in and out during the hearing, and we'll welcome them at that time. We also have Senator Pat Roberts here, and I welcome you. This hearing is, as I said, focused on Washington obstacles to prosperity and property rights in the West. It's an important issue, and I'm glad that the two caucuses are working together closely on this, not just today, but on a constant basis as we deal with the kinds of overreach that I mentioned earlier. Today's hearing features two world-class panels of witnesses, and I'm very thankful that all of you could be here today. Idaho Governor C.L. Butch Otter, my longtime friend and colleague, will head up the first panel. The governor is here to discuss the impacts that an overly aggressive federal agenda can have on Western states and individuals, and its impact on our citizens' rights to manage their lands and resources. And thank you again, Butch, for being here today. I also welcome Mike and Chantell Sackett from Priest Lake, Idaho, and their attorney Damian Schiff, who is here to help us explain a specific circumstance that's getting quite a bit of national attention, which is just one example of the kinds of circumstances that we are facing. We are also joined with Commissioner Johnson, Mayor Fife, and Mr. Knight, who will serve on our second panel as well. I'm going to speak briefly about the case of the Sacketts as well as one other case close to home in North Idaho. Both of these examples highlight the need for today's hearing. And unfortunately, they are not unique in the sense that there are many, many other similar examples of these kinds of problems that are arising. In 2007, the Sacketts were in the early stages of building a home a short distance from the shore of Priest Lake in North Idaho. One day, representatives of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers showed up on their property and told them that they needed a federal wetlands permit to build there, despite the fact that there was no standing water on the property. The government ordered the Sacketts to stop their work, restore their land, and apply for a federal wetlands permit if they wished to build there. The Sacketts were told that if they did not comply, they would be fined tens of thousands of dollars per day. Deeply concerned about their rights as landowners, the Sacketts sued the EPA, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that they were not entitled to immediate judicial review. However, just last month, the United States Supreme Court heard their case, which I should add was presented to the court by Mr. Schiff in a performance that has received rave reviews. While we will not know the court's decision until this spring or summer, I'm cautiously optimistic that the court will, in fact, side with the Sacketts and that they will finally get their day in court. The Sacketts have stated that this case is not about their rights. That this case is about their rights as individuals and property owners and not about the merits of protecting the environment. They, like everyone in this room, want to protect the environment and the resources that make the West such a wonderful place to live and raise a family. But their plight raises serious questions about who we are as a country and what kind of government we want to have. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito captured this consideration perhaps best of all when, during the oral argument, he asserted that, and I quote, "Most ordinary homeowners would say that this couldn't happen in the United States." This is something that all of us should think about. As if the Sackett's case were not bad enough on its own, there's a similar, equally troubling case just a few short miles away from their property. In 2010, Jack Barron was found not guilty by a jury of his peers for filling wetlands on his property in advance of building a home there. After the trial, Mr. Barron had hoped to return to life as usual and enjoy his retirement, but he was instead notified that despite winning in a criminal court, he was still going to be pursued in a civil case by the authorities. And they are now faced with a major dilemma. Either comply with the EPA demands that they restore the property, or keep fighting the government and face fines of up to $37,500 a day. The Barrons, like most Idahoans, do not have unlimited means, and most of their retirement savings were spent defending themselves in criminal court. These circumstances present the very real possibility that they may lose their property. And this brings us again to the question framed by Justice Alito in the Sackett case. Did anyone ever imagine that this could or would happen in America? We are not here today to question the merits of protecting our environment. We all support clean air and water and the protection of our treasured landscape and resources. But we must be concerned when enforcement starts becoming an end unto itself and we start ignoring the impacts that arbitrary, heavy-handed federal enforcement can have on the lives of people and their communities. Today we're going to hear example after example of that happening. Again, I want to thank our witnesses for attending this hearing, and I will at this time turn to Co-Chairman Representative Steve Pierce for any statement you would like to make. I'll ask the last question. I just want to follow up. I know the answer to this question, but I want to give you an opportunity to
of course you do. You're a lawyer.
On the question on the table. A number of years back when we were trying to reform the Endangered Species Act and several others to give greater management authority to states, and whether it be under the Endangered Species Act or, as you've talked today about, our management of the forest or the wolves, the question often put is, can we move management authority under a number of these different laws back to the states? The response we got at the time that I'm thinking about, this was back in the mid-90s when we had a very strong push for reform of the Act. The response that we got at that time, which actually stopped us from being successful in Congress, was that A, the states are not committed to protecting the environment and are not committed to the kind of multiple use management that will assure that we perpetually have these tremendous environmental heritages protected and maintained, and B, that the states do not have the expertise that the federal government has to be able to manage, whether it be the forests or any other aspects of our resources. I'd like to give you a chance to respond to that, to both of those arguments.
We find just the contrary. In fact, a lot of times when we're asked for on a proposed rule and we're asked for input, who do they come to and ask for input? They come to our state agencies. My Fish and Game is probably just as professional and just as scientifically capable of arriving at a decision as anybody. Their whole budget depends upon the success and the amount of fish and wildlife that we have in the state, because the only money they get nothing from the general fund. All they get is how many fishing licenses and how many hunting licenses and what kind of activity in that industry that they can increase, that they can incur. And so it's actually, Senator, it is just the opposite. Or are they just being nice to us and saying, well, you know, we're going to have to listen to them vent, or that's something? I think there are some agencies that are very sincere in that. And I would have to tell you that I find Secretary Salazar being very receptive to all kinds of input. We just put together our task force on sage grouse. And as a result of the Wyoming experience and the success that they had in putting theirs together, which was a protocol that was established by then Governor Risch on the roadless rule, on the roadless plan in Idaho, the only roadless plan that we have actually in operation in the United States today. Our state agencies do care. We live there. We've raised generations of folks in Idaho. They're born on those watersheds. They're born on those resources. Many of them toil for a living all their lives. They raise families there. and many of them are buried on that same watershed and in those same resource areas. We do care about it. I've always been struck, even when I was in Congress, by the folks that say, well, no, we want to put wolves in Idaho, or we want to put this, or we want to do that, because we think it's great for the nation. But yet they don't want to put them in their state. They want to put them in some other state. I hear from environmental groups all over the United States when we started our wolf hunt, our very successful wolf hunt, that why was I killing all those wolves and how beautiful they were. And you respond back to them and say, when was the last time you came to Idaho, spent some money to look at a wolf? I can tell you the answer to that. If they're so great, then why don't they want them in their own state? When Congressman Simpson and I were working together in Congress, as you might recall, with tongue in cheek, we wanted to reintroduce wolves into the Adirondacks. And the resistance, we couldn't even get the bill printed. The resistance was pretty stiff. So if they're so great, why don't we put them in their state?
Well, thank you, Governor. Like I said, I knew the answer to the question, but I wanted to let one of our strong governors get a chance to put the response to that question on the record. Governor, we'd all like to go on longer, but we've got to move ahead with the next panel. We appreciate you taking the time, and I know the commitment that it took for you to be here. And we appreciate not only your being here, but your strong, solid leadership in Idaho and in the West. And
thank you.
Again, thank you for being here.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And now we'll call up our second panel. Our second panel is composed of Mr. and Mrs. Mike and Chantell Sackett from Idaho, and they're putting out the name tags. Let's have to see where they place them out here for you. Damian Schiff, Senior Attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation. Dr. Dennis Fife, Mayor of Brigham City, Utah. Mark Knight, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the Kansas Livestock Association. And Buster Johnson, the Chairman of the Mojave County Board of Supervisors in Arizona. Thank you, Representative. And I'm going to ask a couple of questions right now. I wanted to put up a couple of pictures. Can we put the first picture up? Chantell and Mike, this is, I believe, a picture of your property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This is what the EPA says is a wetland. Now, is this because the EPA has some bigger regional map that covers this area, or how did they decide this was a wetland, you know?
Well, they told us that our property was in a wetland inventory. And when they first told us that, I had no idea what that was. So they gave us the coordinates to our property, and they said, you can go find it on the map. So we did that. It took me a while. It's a new thing that I had to kind of get myself through. And I had some help with one of our employees. Mm-hmm. But when we figured out what the coordinates were, our property wasn't in the inventory. It was around it, or the inventory was around our property. Our property wasn't on their wetlands.
So it wasn't even actually in an EPA inventory?
No, it wasn't. And when I told them that, they said, well, that's not always correct.
And I suppose you told them that there wasn't any standing water on the property also. Let's go to the second picture. And I know you made this point in your testimony, Mike, but this picture shows that this is a developed or a platted subdivision. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The subdivision was built in the early 80s, and that hopefully someday will be our neighbor.
I hope so too. And tell me again, there aren't just houses next to you, but there are roads built.
Yeah, that is correct. You are looking right to the east at that right now at that picture, and to the north and to the south would be towards the lake. There's county roads on both sides.
All right, and again, no standing water on the property of any kind.
No.
Let's just put up the last picture, and this is the one where this is your property also, correct? Or is that nearby?
No, we're walking on our property.
You're walking on your property here.
Yeah.
Well, my hope is that the houses we saw will be your neighbors soon, and that you'll be sitting on a porch there or whatever it is that you are able to build there. And I just want to tell you that to me, it's part of the American dream to be able to find a place where you want to live and build a life there. And to see the EPA stepping in with such outrageous conduct and then not even allowing for accountability is something that has caught the vision of many, many people in America, and I commend you for standing up and fighting back. And I know that our whole delegation in Idaho will support you in this. We've been joined by Senator Lee, and if you care to ask any questions, Senator Lee, the floor is yours. And in conclusion, let me just indicate my thanks to Representative Pierce and Senator Barrasso for their leadership in the Congressional and the Senate Western Caucuses because of the specific types of issues that you have each brought before us today. We have two very strong caucuses that have grown up in the House and in the Senate who are committed to finding solutions. And some of the solutions that we've identified that we need to focus on are in this booklet, the Western Caucus Jobs Frontier booklet, that you may be of interest to, and we can certainly make that available. I think the REINS Act is one of the provisions that's in here. If not, it should be. And a number of other proposals that we've identified as solutions to push back and to try to correct the problems that we are facing. We look to you for helping us to develop not only the agenda that our caucuses will pursue, but also to help us promote a better understanding across the country of the need for these kinds of reforms. And your being here today with us has been very instrumental in that regard, whether it's individuals like the Sacketts or the Knights, or whether it's a city or a county, or someone who's working with an association or a foundation in this case that's committed to finding solutions. People around the country are starting to recognize the incredibly broad reach of the overreach of the federal agencies. And I believe that we're going to have increasing success as we move forward here in our efforts with the caucuses to find solutions and to correct these wrongs. Again, I want to thank you all for taking the time and making the effort to be with us today. And with that, unless there's anything else, this hearing will be adjourned.